biggest question in the mind of people globally at this moment is, when will the first COVID-19 vaccine become available internationally and, more importantly, in India? The Oxford vaccine trial is demonstrating very favorable results so far, and to talk about this big global headline, we are joined live and exclusive on India Today News Track at this time by Professor Andrew J. Pollard. He's the chief investigator and lead researcher of the Oxford vaccine trial, a very important person internationally at this moment. With us for a perspective on what will happen once and if the vaccine gets approval in the UK, we've got Adar Poonawalla, Chief Executive Officer of the Serum Institute of India, which is the world's largest vaccine manufacturer. And I want to go across to Professor Andrew Pollard first. Professor Pollard, congratulations. Everyone globally tracking this vaccine trial more closely than any vaccines been tracked so far. Could you at the outset explain to our viewers why you are so confident that the vaccine trials that you're doing at Oxford University so far are heading in the right direction? What's giving you this great confidence, Professor Pollard?
Well, I think we've arrived at a first important milestone in vaccine development, which is showing that the vaccine makes the right sort of immune responses, and that is both neutralizing antibody responses as well as a type of white blood cell called T cells, both of which we think are likely to be important for protection. But this is only a milestone on the route. We still have to prove that the vaccine actually works and can protect people in the clinical trials. And so that rigorous scientific process continues as we go forward. So we have to do the research and be able to demonstrate protection over the months ahead.
So the next question, what do you believe, Andrew Pollard, would be the next milestone everybody needs to look out for, and what are the kind of pitfalls that you and the team at Oxford University are currently trying to avoid?
Well, I think the next thing that we need to do is to evaluate the immune response in other segments of the population. For example, the elderly, where we know there is a particular risk of disease, but it's much harder to get vaccines to work well in that age group. So we're doing studies of the older adults to look at the immune response. But the next really big milestone is this question of protection. Can we show in the trials that the vaccine prevents disease? And that's something which we're working very hard with investigators all around the UK, as well as in Brazil and in South Africa, to get to that critical endpoint. And your question about the pitfalls, well, there's a big effort now needed to scale up manufacturing, to make sure there's enough vaccine available to supply the world if indeed we are able to show that we can develop protection with this product.
So that's where Adar Poonawalla fits into this picture, the need to scale up vaccine manufacturing. Adar, can you explain to our viewers who are waiting very anxiously for this vaccine to become available, the kind of plans you've made to be able to roll out the vaccine, the amount of manufacturing you'll be able to do, and the kind of timelines you're looking at, Mr. Poonawalla?
So Rahul, firstly, can you hear me? The audio had a bit of a problem. Hello?
We hear you fine. Go ahead, Adar. I hear you just fine.
So, we've put in a lot of efforts in the OPEX and the CAPEX. So we've set aside 2 facilities, exclusively dedicated them for this manufacturing. And in fact, we've even made a few million doses under the test and analysis license. And we're very soon going to apply for this week, in fact, for the large-scale manufacturing license, along with the phase 3 clinical trials that we want to do in India, made from the product made in India. So as soon as that comes through, we'll be going into large-scale manufacturing in August, early August to mid-August. And, we've also got all the glass vials and the raw materials and the supply chain organized as well for these large volumes at short notice. So I think by the end of this year, we should be able to produce 300 to 400 million doses come end of December. That's the target, and I hope we can do that. So we're also very hopeful that the phase 3 trials actually prove, as Professor Pollard mentioned, that the vaccine actually works.
You're saying that you could have 300 to 400 million vials of this vaccine ready by the end of the year?
Doses. So it's in 10-dose vials, but yes, 300 to 400 million doses.
That's important. So therefore, Professor Pollard, the next question is about what all could potentially go wrong, given the fact that this is a trial, and we were reading some research which says if 100 vaccines go into trial, at the end there's one that gets approval from the drug regulators. What all could potentially go wrong from here till the time you get final sanction to actually roll out this vaccine internationally?
Well, I think the major challenge is being able to prove that the vaccine works. And here in the UK at the moment, we had a prolonged period of lockdown and have really suppressed the number of cases. So that makes it much more difficult to demonstrate protection. If there's no virus being transmitted in the community, it's quite hard to show protection. But that's why we have trial sites all around the UK and elsewhere to try to make sure that we don't have the risk of just failing to demonstrate the result that we're all after. But I think, as you were just hearing, the upscaling of manufacturing to the huge numbers of doses that are needed to protect people all around the planet is an enormous challenge. It's never been done before on the scale that we're talking about, with potentially having billions of doses available within less than a year. And I think that is a major challenge technically to do that really heavy lift to make so many doses and to get the process right to allow that to be the end result of these efforts that are going on at Serum Institute of India, as well as with other manufacturing facilities around the world.
Now, the one question, Professor Pollard, everybody has when they hear about the vaccine trial being expedited in this fashion is the possibility of side effects. Ordinarily, it takes up to a decade and a half to get approval for a vaccine. Now, we are rushing this process through. The virus only started spreading globally in the early part of the year. By the end of the year, if you actually have a vaccine, which means a process that takes 15 years has been condensed into one, would we know enough about long-term risk? How do we know that this vaccine, even if it looks safe at this moment, will not have any deleterious effects on our bodies going forward?
Although we've been expediting this process because of the urgency of a pandemic, there haven't been any shortcuts. So the quality of the product is looked at in exactly the same way, and the clinical trials are conducted with the same scrutiny that they would be in normal times, with independent safety reviews that are happening very frequently, as well as regulatory oversight of all of the work that we're doing. And I think to that extent, the process that is being undertaken is not really different. It is just happening at an accelerated pace. And I think the one issue, and you raised that, is that we don't have long-term data from even small numbers of individuals, because in a pandemic you don't have time for that. I think, though, that we do have one particular advantage in that this type of vaccine has been used quite widely before. So this vaccine is based on viral vector, and for example, 2 of the above vaccines use viral vectors, both of which are licensed here in Europe. And so I think, though it's important to continue to monitor safety both now and in the longer run, we have enough confidence that this is the right direction of travel at the moment whilst we're doing that, because of the past experiences of these types of vaccines.
So, this vaccine project is being called the Covishield. Can you give us some details about this, and how does this, in your view, compare with Covaxin, which is the other big project in which an Indian company, Bharat Biotech, is involved? So how does your effort compare and contrast with what Dr. Ella and his team at Bharat Biotech are doing?
Well, I think they've taken a virus to inactivate it, and they've explained their process, and they're getting into phase 1, and they will also conduct all the trials and phases that we're all going to do. We've got 5 different candidates, 2 of them inbuilt from Serum Institute with different brand names that we'll announce as they come closer to a phase 3. Covishield is the brand and the product that we're exclusively making for Oxford and AstraZeneca. So that's going to be the first one to market. And then we've got the one from Novavax and many other companies as well. So Covishield is the first COVID-19 vaccine that we hope to launch if the trials are successful both in the UK and in India.
So by when do you hope to be able to launch this vaccine? By when will the first doses of the vaccine, Mr. Poonawalla, be available for Indian consumers?
So again, when we said we could make 300 to 400 million doses, by the time they're released by the CDL, which is the central testing labs and all of that, and it actually reaches people and human beings in large volumes in India and the citizens of India, it would probably be first quarter of 2021. I mean, a few million doses may go out before that, but we're talking the large-scale vaccination programs realistically would probably take off, then, because if we start our phase 3 today, let's say in another 2 weeks from now, we'll still take about 2 months to complete it, and then various other procedures and things, because again, as Professor Pollard said, we're fast-tracking things, but we don't want to circumvent any quality issues, stability issues, production issues, and all of that. So, we will have those doses ready, but by the time a lot of people get it, realistically, probably first quarter 2021.
So, explain this to our viewers. Between the time the UK regulators give the go-ahead to the Oxford vaccine and the launch in India, we will need to have trials on this vaccine on Indian citizens as well. When does that process start? What does that process involve, and where are we at in trying to roll out that process?
So this week itself, our team is presenting all the data of the phase 1/2 study of Oxford and all of the safety data that Oxford has presented, and it's been published in Lancet, and it's excellent. And based on that, we're hoping that the DCGI reviews it and gives us a phase 2/3 trial permission in the coming weeks, so that we can start the trial and recruitment and end that trial in the next 2 months, 2.5 months, because there won't be an issue in recruitment, and the cases in India are still rising. So statistically, to prove whether the vaccine works or not will be relatively easier compared to the UK, where the cases, as Professor Pollard mentioned, are declining. Having said that, we don't know. It'll take 2 to 3 months. And after that, we'll look at a licensure. And in parallel, we're going to be manufacturing the product at risk, like we've mentioned, so that come November, from today, we have 300 to 400 million doses, November, December.
We know that you're very fond of horses and horse racing. So if I were to draw an analogy from the races, this is a bit of a punt, is it not, Adar? The hope that in the end the vaccine will prove to be efficacious, and therefore as a punt you're keeping the entire manufacturing line ready?
Yes, we've sacrificed a lot of other lucrative products, so that in fact not only keeping the vaccine line ready, but for the last 3 months we have switched over to the COVID production equipments and all the things that are needed. So for the next 2 to 3 years, we've dedicated this and committed to the COVID crisis, that whether it's this vaccine or another vaccine, but most probably we really do believe that the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine has got a very high chance of success. That's why we've taken this punt. We've not taken such a big punt on any other vaccine in starting to manufacture it. In fact, we're not going to be manufacturing many of the other vaccines at risk at all. We're only doing this for the Oxford product because of the confidence we have in Professor Pollard and his team and everyone at Oxford in the great work that they're doing. So we're it's a calculated bet. I wouldn't call it a bet at the races. That would be an uncalculated bet, but this is a very strategic and committed bet. We want to commit that this is going to work, and then we have to, work backwards to do that.
So, Professor Pollard, at a time when there are so many Chinese companies in the fray, there are American companies in the fray, there is top private dollar in the race, we've got old-time university in the UK leading the race. Can you take our viewers behind the scenes a bit at Oxford University and give us a sense of what's happening in the team? How has life been like, given that this is almost like the next race to get to the moon? Who gets to the moon first? Who gets the first COVID vaccine out? It's a bit of the same. Give us a sense of what it's been like behind the scenes in this vaccine project.
Well, I think it's an interesting analogy with the horse races, because in a horse race you really want to just have one winner. But I think here all of us would like to have multiple hits on target. And the reason for that is that, as you were just hearing from Mr. Poonawalla, the challenge for the planet is that there are people everywhere who need to be protected from this virus. And it's going to be very difficult with one vaccine to rapidly get to the point where we have many billions of doses in order to achieve that. So I don't think really this is a competition. We really are racing against the virus, not against each other. And I think it's really important that we continue a collaborative spirit and work together on that. And to your second question about what's life like here, it's been pretty intense over the course of this year so far, since the genetic code of the virus was first known in January. Everyone's been working flat out, first of all, to develop the vaccine and do the initial preclinical testing, and then get it into these very large-scale trials, both here in the UK and around the world. And as you've been hearing from Mr. Poonawalla, the really important work of working with partners in India, but also in other parts of the world, to make sure the technology is transferred to be able to manufacture the vaccine, and to then conduct the trials in different geographies around the world.
And how do you compare the effort that you're making with, for example, technologies like the one that Moderna is using? And are you keeping an eye on what the Chinese are up to, what the Russians are up to, what the Americans are doing, and trying to collaborate and use their research? Or is it just focused on the effort that the Oxford group is making and not necessarily in collaboration at this moment with the international vaccine trials?
Well, we do discuss with the other developers frequently, and I have to say they've been enormously helpful. Right at the beginning, we had some really positive discussions with some of the Chinese vaccine developers who were developing a very similar type of vaccine, and had some really good pointers at the beginning for us. And we've also been discussing with our colleagues in the United States and in other countries around the world about their development programs, and sharing advice and ideas about how to write the clinical trial protocols so that they're lined up, about the laboratory testing. It's a very collaborative spirit in this pandemic.
Mr. Poonawalla, how much will each dose of the vaccine cost? Do you have any sense at this moment?
It's still a bit early of how much it will cost. And of course, we're going to give it at a very affordable price. Today the testing is 2,500 rupees for a test. You've got remdesivir and other drugs which are going into tens of thousands of rupees. So we're planning to put it at about 1,000 rupees or less than that, as the volumes pick up. And I don't think any citizen of India or any other country most probably is going to have to pay for it, because it's going to be bought by the government mainly and then distributed free. So, but having said that, it'll still be very affordable. For the Gavi countries and African countries, we've committed to give it at $2-3 a dose. And so it's going to be, again, in line with our general philosophy of, giving everything at a very affordable price. And we generally don't want to make a profit at all. In fact, in the COVID crisis, in the pandemic state, after the pandemic is over, we may look at a more commercial price that could be available in the private market, like other drugs are. But during the pandemic period, we've committed not to, charge a very high price, which anyway we don't for most of our vaccines.
So you're saying this Covishield is likely to cost less than 1,000 rupees. Professor Pollard, in the way that you're going and at the rate at which you're going, when do you expect to be able to complete the trials, the final human trials? When do you think they'll be completed?
Well, it's the same difficult question that you asked before, which is how long will it take to prove that the vaccine works? And as I said, that is something we can't completely plan for, because it depends on how many cases of coronavirus occur amongst the volunteers who are in the trial. I hope it will be a matter of months, but if there's a very low rate of disease, it may take longer. And as you heard from Mr. Poonawalla, there's also additional trials in India and in the United States and in other countries around the world where there is more disease than there is in the UK at the moment, and that may allow us to get a hit on target even earlier.
Okay, so we've had an interesting conversation, and therefore we have some sense. To recap, you're saying forget 15th August, there'll be no vaccine around Independence Day. This is a much longer haul than that. Don't get caught up in all rumors that you may see on WhatsApp. You're saying at the very earliest, you hope to hit the market, because people who are watching want to know when can they get access to the virus. If everything goes as per plan, by about the first quarter of the next year. So January to March 2021. That's essentially what you're telling us, Adar?
Yes, and look, a few million doses in November, December may be available, but the full 300 to 400 million doses that we're producing, by the time it's actually rolled out and available to the public and distributed to the different states, you've got to add another month, to do all that and plan the cold chain and all that in that.
No, so when you say a few million doses could be available, and I know that will become a contentious issue in India and internationally, how do you decide who the first few million go to? So, one of course is that Mr. Poonawalla and all his friends get it. I'm just being flippant when I say that. But the reality is that one question, where do you give it, who do you give it to, and how do you ensure that those who need it the most are the ones who get it earliest? Mr. Poonawalla?
So that's exactly why we've given that decision to the government to appropriately, with the health experts, decide the most vulnerable categories: the elderly, the immunocompromised, our heroes, the healthcare workers on the front lines. They should get it first, and then the healthy adults like you and I can get it maybe a bit later on. And that would be an ethical way of distributing it. And we also said that we want to give it half to other countries and half to India. So we all ethically need to understand that this is a global crisis. And of course, our countrymen come first, and every country will assume that as a national pride. But we have to understand that if you don't protect people all over the world, you're putting your people at risk as well. Their businesses won't start, they won't be able to work. When you travel there, you're at risk, and vice versa. So it's very important that we try and equally immunize the whole world in as fair a manner as possible. And we said that we'll give India 50%. And the rest of the world 50% on a pro rata basis every month. And the government of India seems to be supportive of that as well. If anything changes on that, I'll let you know, but I guess we'll all hear about it. But at the moment, it seems that this is the way it's going to go once the vaccine is licensed.
And the other thing which you said, which is important, Adar, is that you've been told that the government will buy out all your vaccines, and that nobody who's watching will have to pay for it, that this will actually be a government administered vaccination program, not something that private citizens need to pay for?
Well, I think a little bit may later on end up in the private market and the distributor chain. But, the way the government of India has requested us to give them the vaccine, it is going to be part of the government immunization programs. Like there's a whole plethora of vaccines that today the government buys and, immunizes children across all the states today for so many vaccines. So it's going to have to be something like that, because again, don't forget, for us to distribute and immunize people rapidly, you need the government machinery and the whole setup to do that. So no single company or distributor in the market would be able to reach that speed in a matter of weeks or a month. As soon as the products come out, you've got all the cold chain and the whole setup through the government channels, which are being used right now for so many vaccines, which will be used for this rollout. So I don't see any citizen of India paying for this vaccine, or at least I don't think they should, because, this is a national security issue, and, the government should put in their efforts, which they are, to immunize everybody one as soon as possible as a national security issue.
Finally, Mr. Pollard, do you see this becoming a physical security issue as well? Because the moment the vaccine's out, do you see a massive clamor in India, internationally, to get their hands on the first few doses? Because this, in some senses, is your ticket to nirvana, or post-COVID kind, that you get your vaccine, then after a while you're safe. So how do you foresee, and how important do you think an orderly rollout, an orderly, consequential, sequential rollout of the vaccine is to this whole project, so that it doesn't lead to, virtually riots and people breaking into places where the vaccine's lying to try and get hold of the first few doses of the vaccine? How do you prevent all of that?
I mean, I think it's very important that there is equitable access around the world to vaccine, and a lot of efforts are going in internationally to look at mechanisms that ensure that that happens. But you're absolutely right that there will be many people who would like to be vaccinated, and particularly early on when there's constrained supply, it may be much more difficult to make sure that everyone who wants to be vaccinated has access. And so that has to be very carefully managed. It'll be different in every country. But there is also this issue that was raised about the health security, that we really need people around the world to be vaccinated, so that vulnerable people who travel to those places, or if a virus is imported to countries where there is some vaccination happening, that everyone is protected. So it's in all of our interests to make sure that we have good and equitable supply around the world as soon as possible.
Well, we've had a very meaningful conversation, touched upon several critical questions which are in people's minds. We know that in India, at least, this could be a government-sponsored vaccine program, might cost less than 1,000 rupees. Others saying the earliest rollout could be in November, December, but that will be a limited rollout, larger scale rollout, more likely January through March 2021. But most importantly, Professor Andrew Pollard and his team first need to ensure that they get final clearance from the regulators in the UK to be able to roll out this vaccine in the UK and then internationally. We'll also keep an eye on the Indian trials, which Mr. Poonawalla hopes will start very soon. It's not just the UK trials, there have to be human trials in India as well for the vaccine to get clearances from Indian drug regulators. Professor Andrew Pollard, we wish you all the best. And the good thing about the way that the Oxford University is leading this project is that you're not hoping to put just a British flag. You're taking from the word go this as an international project, and that's the way that you're seeing it, not even looking to make money, also because it's a public university, but also because of the fact that that's the key commitment, not seeing competition between China, the US, the UK and other countries, but as a collaborative project for all of mankind. Now, Poonawalla, we'll of course keep tracking when those doses come out and the punt that you've made, whether that punt actually works out or not. For the time being, Professor Andrew Pollard and Nader Poonawalla for joining us on this successful first phase of the human trials. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll slip into a quick break right now. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Lots of very interesting details there. We'll keep tracking the vaccine project very, very closely here on the news track. We're slipping into a break. More for you on the other side. Stay with us.
Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kamal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.